Hey everybody, this is Jurius Doctor, and I'm running for CSM15. To get started, I wanted to make this video in the usual format and style that I do for all the rest of my YouTube videos. And the reason for this is that, for one, it's good to be consistent, and for the other, I'm somebody who teaches people. I teach new bros, I teach existing players, I help people learn this game. The purpose of the CSM, how the votes happen, a lot of this still doesn't make a lot of sense to people. So I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to teach you guys about how the Single Transferable Vote system works in EVE Online and how the elections come to pass. I'm going to talk about myself and my platform, and I'm going to explain who I think you should vote for and why. So the Council of Stellar Management, for those of you who aren't aware, is a group of 10 player representatives to CSP games. And these individuals are elected annually by the player base. Candidacy is open and voted upon by all mega accounts, and they are a focus group for CCP. So they're a group of players brought in to counsel and provide feedback to CCP on development initiatives that CCP has going. They counsel CCP on the health of the game. They provide feedback on the dev roadmap and on new development, reviewing new and unreleased features, and they may suggest new features and provide feedback on balance to CCP. They also act as intermediaries between the players and CCP, helping to kind of filter a lot of those requests down into, a more cohesive set of messaging. Because, you may have, with 300,000 people playing this game, you may have anywhere between 50 and 5,000 people all screaming for the same thing, like ending cloaky camping, or, they want the ability to design their own ship skins so that somebody can fly a Hello Kitty thorax, But that all needs to get to CCP without spamming the crap out of them, so they spend their entire day focusing on responding to players instead of doing their jobs. The CSM can really, in a big way, help to filter a lot of those requests and get stuff to them in a way that is actionable and, good feedback, and comes through the lens of somebody who is an active player of the game and experienced in the game in a particular area of specialty or focus. The current CSM 14 elected membership are Aerith of Goonswarm Federation, Merkel Chen of Goonswarm Federation, Innominate of Goonswarm Federation, Killaby of Northern Coalition, Steve Ronikin of Fuzzworks Enterprises, and Steve is of particular note because he develops a lot of third-party tools for the game, and pretty much if you've used a website other than Zedkill, you've probably touched a little bit of his code somewhere. Then there's Gobbins from Pandemic Horde, Villy from Test Alliance, please ignore. Gobbins and Villy are two of the oldest names in EVE Online. They're two of the oldest continuously playing personalities. And then there's Dunk Dinkle from Brave Collective, Exukis from Scary Wormhole People, and Omega Gold from Delve Pest Control. Number of these people decided to not run this year, and so there's a few seats coming open this year for sure. And I don't count all of these seats as spoken for, but it is a pretty well-known factor that the Goonswarm Federation, NC, Pandemic Horde Test, these are large voting blocks in Null. And these are groups that actively get out there and vote. In fact, the over-representation of nullsec candidates on the CSM has been a very strong thing for basically the last, at least the last 10 CSMs. It's unusual to not see the slate filled with candidates from nullsec. And I myself live in nullsec, so the fact that I'm saying this should be notable to you. So how long can a CSM member stay on? And this is something that very recently changed in the last few weeks. As of 2020, each CSM member is limited to a maximum of a 3-year consecutive term, in the sense of being elected 3 years in a row, after which they must relinquish their seat. How you vote for candidates that are announced, there will be a period of 2 weeks for campaigning, ending on the 29th, and you will then be able to vote on June 1st. And if you want to see my campaign post, you can find that at tinyurl.com/jd-4-CSM15. But let's talk about actually casting the ballots. So on June 1st, 2020, you're going to navigate to this link. You're going to want to do this on each of your subscribed characters. How the vote works is that the community as a group cast their ballots, and they rank their ballots 1 through 10 in order of priority of who they want to see voted onto the CSM. But everybody should be filling all of their vote slots and ranking the people they want to see out of the official candidates list onto the top 10 spaces. Those ballots are then submitted. Then from there, people with sufficient votes to pass the threshold for entry, there's a quota that has to be passed and satisfied. Those who meet that number are entered into the finalists. Those who have the lowest votes are immediately removed from the running. So if somebody has 5,000 votes, they'll get in. If somebody has 200, they won't. However, the single transferable vote system has a great way of dealing with this so that those votes that get eliminated, they're not for naught. Any votes above the quota for successful candidates, the excess votes go to their next favorite. The same thing happens for those people eliminated at the bottom. And then those votes are recycled back into the algorithm. So let's use me as an example. Let's say I'm your favorite vote. And a whole bunch of people feel the same way. And I get into the number one spot on a bunch of ballots. Be it individual people who visit my YouTube channel or who watch me on Twitch or who have talked with me in the community and worked with me on ideas for, how can we make this game better? And I am required to get a quota of 3,000 votes, but I actually end up with 4,515. So I pass it by a substantial amount. Well, my next choice would be Mike Azariah. And let's say Mike only gets 2,120. Any excess votes that I would have in this hypothetical scenario would go to him. So I would be left at the threshold, and those additional votes will go to Mike, bringing him up to a level to satisfy his ability to get it. Now, let's say Comey comes in with a low amount of votes, 345 votes. She is immediately eliminated because she's at the bottom of the order list. And there'll be successive rounds of the algorithm eliminating people and including people into the list. So what happens to her 345 votes? Well, those are still votes cast by the community. Those are votes that people took to the time to vote. Those votes should be counted in. So they will go to her next highest candidate, her second favorite candidate. And if, in this case, if that's Torvald Uruz, and she has enough to bring him up above the threshold, he then satisfies that quota as well. And this process has gone through at the top and at the bottom of the list through multiple cycles until eventually we have the finalized list of 10 candidates. If you want a more expansive video, if this still doesn't make sense for you, go to tinyurl.com/democracymonkey. And I've linked that to a YouTube video that does a very, very good job of explaining this system using animals in the animal kingdom. Who am I in the story of New Eden? Well, I'm Jurius Doctor. I started playing this game back in 2008, took a break, and when I came back, I decided to create all new characters because I honestly had not really gotten invested in the game the first time around, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I biomassed all my characters, and I started up with Jurius. And I wanted to learn. And a big part of returning to the game in 2013 was that it was a time of real excitement. Like Rubicon had just dropped, a whole bunch of new development was really ramping up. It was a time when you really saw a big increase in the development curve, and we saw some really cool stuff happening, like sleeper caches and stuff coming in. And at that time, I joined EVE University, where I wanted to learn to play the game and eventually become a part of the teaching community and event staff so I could help people get excited about the game. I led lore trips around the sightseeing locations in EVE, including the Battle of B-Tech R5RB, the wreck of the EV Seraph, the Titan Honor-Guard at Amar, and eventually including sites like Empress Khatice's Honor-Guard. And those are the kinds of things that really people get excited about because they get involved in the story of the game. And it gives them an opportunity while I'm teaching classes to help impart some of this knowledge on them. And I found I really enjoyed the teaching aspect. I enjoyed recruiting people to the game and trying to attract people in. But eventually I started to feel like I was stagnating at EVE University, and a friend invited me to join him in Iron Armada. And I realized at the time also that I could take my teaching of New Bros up to YouTube. So I created a YouTube channel. I started creating my own content, videos in the same format as what you're watching right now. And I started explaining things to people. And I had a really positive response from that. So that's what I've stayed with. From 2016 to today, I've focused on attracting and developing the skills of new players. As much as possible, I worked to actively know the game well enough to be able to teach it to others. And am I an expert in every aspect of the game? Hell no. That would take decades, more time than I have available. But I am very knowledgeable about certain areas of the game, and I am at least generally conversant in all areas of the game. I can explain it well enough to teach it to other people, which means I'm able to explain it well enough to talk about the problems in a room of others and argue the finer points. What do I do for EVE? I attract and teach new players. I actively work to improve the game experience for new players by working with them directly and helping them through the early stages of the game. I help existing players to stay engaged and try new things by exposing them to other areas of the game they may not be familiar with, and to show them in video format what are the things that they can do if they get into it. How can it be profitable? How can they become self-sufficient? And how can they avoid burnout? What do I do myself in New Eden? Well, I teach new bros, obviously. I do planetary interaction. I do industry. I build capitals. Mine, obviously, to help feed those activities. And I do a lot of exploration. Largely, that has recently turned to sightseeing and trying to track down the various beautiful art assets that CCP has put into this game. I really enjoy doing Abyssal Dead Space, which is fun to do when I'm streaming or if I'm just trying to kill some time. And I like doing Squadron Commander, Skirmish Command, doing small roams, small time FCing, mostly with my Newbro Corporation. And I enjoy fitting and theory crafting and helping people with fits and helping people to understand, what are the benefits of fitting their ships a certain way. Why me? What does Jurius Doctor do for the community? Let's hear what the community has to say. But why am I running for CSM? Well, EVE North 2019, we had CCP Manboard come out on stage and talk about the fact that on an average week, we get about 21,000 people try this game on a weekly basis. That number might fluctuate. In the first week, half of those people who register for the game will log in for the first time. And by day 7, we will lose 90% of those people. Our ability to attract players is huge. If you add up 20,000 people a week, you're talking almost 1 million people a year try this game. And we keep 50,000 of them. That is an abysmal fall off. And I aim to do something about it. I want to work with CCP to turn this around. What do I get out of it? I get a greater opportunity to interact with CCP and counsel them on how to train, retrain, and attract new players. I get a chance to get in front of them and help them solve this problem. What do you get out of it? Well, what's good for new players is good for the rest of the game. More people to fight, more recruits for your corporations, greater competition in the market, a focus on new engaging content and lore, because you've got to provide those new players new content to keep them engaged and to help the existing players get re-engaged with that initial story content, and a higher likelihood that CCP will spend on player-driven events. The more people there are, and the greater we have an opportunity to reach out and attract from the regular, expanded gaming community, people playing other games. These kinds of events are more likely to be sponsored if we can show that these initiatives work, that we can get these people in. And the more, people coming into the game, the more money CCP has to spend, the more they can justify putting bodies on those kinds of player-driven events. So let's talk about my key platform points, and I call these the 4 Cs. Just like CCP is building a new structure, there's a lot of work that still has to be done to build a more solid foundation for this game. This is something CCP's Hilmar Peterson has actually already talked about in a stream, is, right now they're in a period where they're cleaning things up and they want to focus on building a stronger foundation for attracting new players. The first part of this has to be conflict drivers. This is both for the existing players of the game and to draw people in. People come to EVE overwhelmingly because they've been interested by the fact that they've heard it in the news. They've seen it published on Kotaku and PC Gamer. They come to this game because they're interested in what's happening. The second is we need some cleanup, and there's some corrective measures that still have to happen to firm up that foundation so that you can build something big on it. We need corporate improvements. The corporate system in EVE needs an overhaul. It hasn't been touched since 2015. We're in a phase now where if we're going to continue to grow this game and we're going to use the strongest retention point we have, which is that people who join corporations stay with this game longer, we need to make that system better. And we need content and player-driven development. There are, in my mind, these 4 pillars to build up a healthy community. Without a renewed focus on these, CCP is kind of missing the point. And I think you need vocal candidates who will sit in front of CCP and talk to these points and get these things in front of them. If we don't address these, we're ignoring the herd of elephants in the room. So let's talk a little bit more about the specific points and some of the ideas that I had. And again, these are just my ideas, but I'm here to represent you, and I will listen to your ideas and bring them forward to CCP with the same conviction that I put these points forward myself. let's talk a little bit about pirates. They have a new AI system where they can interface, and they've talked about this themselves, they can interface the standing systems a whole lot more, closely with how emergent AI behaves. And they've been working on testing, what happens when somebody has positive standings with a faction group. Maybe those AIs, when they form a fast response fleet, like they would if you attack their mining ships, maybe those fast response fleets can come to the aid of players. Or maybe players can get involved in forward action by advanced AIs in pirates groups. That is very interesting to me. That is an opportunity to create some really interesting gameplay in all regions of space. We need more work done for LowSec and focusing on PvP and pirate organizations. I would love to see an increased drop rate for kills in LowSec. They've played with this in different events. They've had short-run events that boosted the warp speed in LowSec. They've tried, increasing the drop rate in LowSec and wormholes. I'd like to see this made to be a permanent change. Make it so that LowSec is the place you go to when you're out there to engage in PvP as a pirate. Like, what's the point of being a pirate if you don't get any booty? Get out there, get those kills, get that mad loot. I also think that we should cap the number of upload structures in low-sec constellations. Not only is this going to help faction warfare and take some of the sprawl out of that area of space, but I think there needs to be a very firm cap per constellation on the number of large and extra large structures you can put out there. Keep stars are very detrimentally affecting low-sec. And I'd love to see that change, and I don't think I'm the only one that feels that way. Also, when we talk about faction warfare, preventing opposing factions from docking in controlled stations. If you're, very deep into the Minotaur standings, you should not be able to dock in a Mars stations in a Mars faction warfare controlled space. Like, that makes no sense, and it's robbing a lot of the raison d'etre of being in faction warfare. It takes a lot of the immersion out. It takes a lot of the advantages out. There's just not enough skin in the game there. And I think that high sec risk in its various forms needs reevaluation, because I think high sec has returned back to a state of ease and it's stagnating. So let's talk about cleanup and corrective measures. I think we should add an auto-destruct timer to exploration sites to start on the first hack attempt. So whether that be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I don't care if it's half an hour. A lot of new bros have reached out to me from my exploration videos, from my introduction to being a new bro videos, and they've commented in my comment section. You can go read them yourselves. People saying things like, I've tried following various YouTubers and corporations' advice and starting with exploration. I've tried, following the videos from Signal Cartel, and I get out there and there's no sites to be found, or the sites that I find are half finished and everything in it's crap because people have been cherry picking. And when you leave, you may not understand this, but when you leave a site half finished, it doesn't depopulate, it doesn't despawn. It just sits there in space until somebody either finishes it or we get to downtime. I think adding an auto-destruct timer is an easy fix to clean up space and make it easier for new bros to find sites that are fully populated, especially if we're going to try and turn that number around from keeping 1,000 people a week to 20,000 people a week. If we want to go for 100% retention on new people trying this game, we need to make it so that they have ways to be efficient and to make ISK and to be rewarded for playing the game. And the turnaround to that is increasing the number and spawn rate of non-sleeper exploration sites. So all your common faction exploration sites that you would find in high sec and low sec, I think we need to buff the spawn rate for those and increase the number of them throughout space. We need more anomalies and we need more cosmic signatures. And adjustments to the strength of NPC mining and response fleets. I think right now they're a little overpowered for a lot of regions of space. And if a new player by accident goes in and shoots one of the wrong ships without knowing or hasn't had it explained to them, or at the very least introduce a prompt that says you're about to engage a significantly more powerful NPC fleet. Are you sure you want to do this? At which point then they've said, yes, I'm opting in. I realize I'm going to get my ass handed to me. They can then proceed on their own recognizance. But right now, a lot of players don't know any better and they just get their ships destroyed. And, ignorance is no excuse, but this is something that we can make easier for new players so that we try to hold on to them for longer. I also think we need to nerf small structure reinforce and high sec. That'll go a long way towards cleaning up a lot of the sprawl and a lot of the discarded mobile depots that have, corporate ads on them. It's a lot of junk in space. And I think nerfing small structure reinforce also creates an opportunity for conflict. It creates an opportunity to generate way more kill mails. And I'm not saying get rid of the structure reinforce entirely, but I think 2 days is too long. I think if you're not actively managing those devices, maybe make it 4 hours. Somebody should have the ability to reinforce it, come back and kill it in the same game session. So, I think that this is another way to create, some cleanup in space, correct some things for new players, and make these things more accessible. Let's talk about corporate improvements. First, I think we need to integrate activity tracker data into corporate recommendations and simplify corp advertisements. New players will find the amount of data that they have to sift through to find a corporation in their time zone that is active, that is not a skill farm, that is accepting new players, that speaks their language and has everything they're looking for, is going to be really daunting. And I get that advice a lot from people. And more often than not, people just ask me, because I'm teaching and because I'm active, hey, can I join your corporation? And recently I've teamed up with a new corporation called Ryba, where I help place them and help them at least get their feet wet, so that if they're not, as PvP driven as my regular corporation Iron.Guard, they at least have a place to go. And I've worked with players to go to other corporations. I recommend people to Eve University, to Brave, to Horde all the time, to Karma Fleet, even Palmer Spar. Recommending people go to good organizations that teach, that are active with new players and help them out. But, there's a body of volunteers in this game, players who do that same thing, who work with people. Let's help take the load off of just the player volunteers by providing automations and algorithms that will help suggest to players, hey, you've been doing these things recently and you've spent this much time, mining or doing PI. Would you like to join a corporation that also does these things? And give them the option to choose yes or no, I'd like to try something different, and have the game recommend things to them based on where they have strengths or gaps in their activity tracker. The activity tracker has been gathering this information for months. Let's aggregate that data and make it useful to them. The second thing is, I'd love to see sponsorship of newborn corporations and public fleet initiatives. It would be awesome if in your fleet finder, in addition to having the ability to set your fleets public or, provide standings for them and open up public fleets, Eve University, for example, runs Friday night public fleets on a fairly routine basis, or did last I checked. It would be great if there was an ability to broadcast that public fleet as open to players, especially Newbro players in Newbro systems, so that they receive an Eve mail as though from a mailing list or some sort of engagement to that effect, saying, hey, get into one of these types of ships and come here and you can join us in our public fleet. And this is going to give more people an opportunity to see what it's like to be part of a corporation and go out on large fleets. And particularly people who maybe haven't tried it before, or who've been scared to get into it. And it's particularly more effective if you take a magic school bus approach like Mike Azariah does and give people ships. So if CCP could say, if you're going to run public events and you're going to broadcast them, we'll give you a hangar that will just populate low-isk, Merlins or basic combat frigates. And here's your handout. Or here's a stipend you'll receive each time you run one of these fleets. Pick up some ships in Jita and launch out from there. So, I'd love to see some sort of initiative around that. I don't know what the final look would be, but some way to get public fleets in front of new characters and get them trying it. And, well, I'd love to see a new volunteer body of player counselors who are objective and supervised by CCP, who are able to help Newbros find supportive corporations in their time zone with their language. And these are volunteers who will, as a lesser form of ISD members, have extra powers to help them find those corporations, get introduced and get in quickly, so that we don't have people waiting in long application queues, waiting to get into corporations and not having sort of a warm introduction. I think we need to bridge that gap between what the corporation system is currently able to deliver and what players can do to help ease that process and get people into the game, into corporations, and effective. And the last point, content and player development. I think CCP has waited long enough. I think it's time for them to contract a new series of EVE novels set in the current era. Templar 1 came out in 2014. It's time for new books. Second, we need to give players more insight into the NPE numbers to help us gauge where our player initiative effectiveness is growing. We need to be able to have real-time numbers and dashboards to show us. If we start trying new things as players to attract and retain players and get them into the game, and we want to see those fall-off numbers drop, or we want to see the retention numbers grow, we need to be able to see this, a portion, just a small amount of the same information CCP sees, so that we can pivot when something isn't working, and that we can help people come to the game. And this is good for all of us. CCP needs to adopt a certain degree of radical transparency when it comes to helping us engage with players to help grow this game. I firmly believe that if the right measures are taken, this game can grow to 1 million concurrent players. No problem. I don't think we'll ever hit the 10 million that, BDO and World of Warcraft are getting, but I think 1 million active players and 1 million MER, I think that's completely achievable. And I think that CCP needs to return to doing the periodic roadmap updates that were patterned by ex-CCP Seagull. Yeah, we get EVE Pulse, and it's nice to hear about the next 2-week drip, but we haven't had in a couple of years a serious sit-down video that says, here's the roadmap for the next 2 years, or here's the high points we want you guys to get excited about, that we can't commit on a specific timeline for, but it's coming down the pipe. Give us something. Give us breadcrumbs, even if they don't come to pass or they pivot somewhere along the way and it takes a different shape. Give us something to be excited for, build up our hope, because leaving us in the dark and waiting for 2-week drips, or the occasional keynote high points that you might mention at EVE Vegas or FanFest, it's not enough. We need more. And I think what Seagull was doing when she was there was a good initiative. I think you need to give us bigger pieces to bide our time and to help us build hype and hope for those things coming down the pipe, so that the older players, the established players, the people who want to see where things are going, have a reason to stick around rather than just winning EVE. And I'd love to see CCP release all new high-definition video and art samples for streamers and creators to work with. That is, authorized content that they're not going to get DMCA strikes or takedowns or interference from CCP legal. Give us assets we can use to help grow the hype for this game. Help us help CCP. And last but not least, vote for me. I would love to be your number one choice on your ballots, but I'm just happy to be on your ballot. I think that I have a lot to bring to CCP. I think I have some excellent ideas and I have a very strong voice. But really, as I've mentioned, my number one focus, more than any other corrective action in EVE, is fixing the problem we have right now with new player fall off. It's a problem. So this is just a small cross-section of the things that I'm going to bring to the CSM. If you want a candidate that's going to represent your playstyle, regardless of what it is, and help you grow your game, vote for me between June 1st and 8th, 2020. Every vote counts. And also stay tuned for an additional video where I'm going to cover my recommendation for the CSM15 candidates, and I'm going to show you my ballot, the order they're in, and why I'm voting for them. Thank you.